Well, hello again. We are here to know what are something the most amazing concepts of Java, and that is strings. Okay, so many of the people who are into core Java in their school life or something, they often find this part of the Java as the most complicated part. Like it is difficult for most of them. Why? Because strings in Java are not just any data type, they are actually classes. So whenever we are dealing with anything in Java, let's keep it a rule, ground rule, that everything will be like a class only. Okay, and whenever we are talking or anything we are going to relate with is definitely going to be either a class or an interface or an abstract class or something like that. So we are going to relate from now on everything with classes. So now our strings are actually some classes, and they are not some derived data type or any kind of character array. Those are not the ideal definitions of a string in Java. Okay, so for the first example, like I'll tell you like how can we know like whether string is a class. As you can see, if you remember, like if I have a class here, string demo, so if I have to create an object, I have to do something like this: string demo, the class name, followed by object name equal to new class name constructor, demo, right? This is the way I create an object for any class. Similarly, can you see that this string is actually created on object which contains this word, which is apple. So the way we pass our arguments inside the constructor and initialize a object, similarly we also have our string class here. We can create this object, and if we just go for the normal convention, we can ignore this stuff and just simply write it as a pple within double quotes, pple semicolon, and that just finishes up with an object string ch, right? So we don't have to explicitly call the constructor for the string because it has certain restrictions. Now, what we can do is we can pass another string like ch into another object of my string class, which is fruit, into this ch, right? So if I am doing this, what will I have inside fruit? Let's find out. So I have printed my string here, fruit, and run this code. As you can see, it contains the same thing. So definitely there are different ways we can initialize our strings. Most common way being this one: directly initialize it by putting a word inside a double quote, or you can take it like this, initialize it. Why am I teaching you this method since we can do it in a very simple method? The reason being that string is not the only class which can contain words or sentences. There are some different classes when we come to Java, and those classes are either string buffer or string builder. Okay, these are the two classes which you should be uh, knowing about, except our string classes, because string classes are actually immutable. Immutable, a big word, a big uh, thing, like many people won't get it. Like, what is immutable? Immutable in simple terms means that we cannot modify the object which is created by a string class. That means if I have assigned a value to my ch here, I cannot modify this being in the ch, as in I cannot change the contents of the value. So any modification within the string is prohibited for a string class. It is restricted. So you cannot do that. If you are doing any modification, you store that modified version of your string in different string object. You cannot put it in the same string object, and that is what is we call immutable. So string class is immutable, all the objects are not modifiable. And that brings us like why we use string buffer or string builder classes. String buffer and string builder classes are the classes where you can actually store a string and you can also modify it. Like if I want to suppose do a reverse on a string, suppose like on my this word apple, so I have to run a for loop. I have to extract each and every character of my word, then I have to add it on to a new string, and then I'll get my reverse. I cannot readily convert my ch object here into directly the reverse of it, which is ELPPA, right? This is not possible for string. But when it comes to string builder classes or string buffer classes, in that the objects can do it by having the function here. Okay, so how do we do that? So suppose I'm just creating a string buffer object, my object being ch1 equal to new string buffer. It is as same as you create any class constructor. And here comes the catch, like you cannot do it just like this. You cannot just pass a string like a word or a sentence directly assign them into a string buffer object. You have to always follow this method of assigning the object. So here what you can do is you can pass the string object directly inside this, right? So here it is showing a warning like replace the string buffer or builder by string, because Java is like why are you going for a complicated one where you can usually do the same operation through a string because you're actually passing a string. And since another thing which we have to understand here, and it is very essential to know at this juncture, that all the words which are or all the sentences, anything specified within double quotes, right, will be treated as string as by default by Java, right? So whenever you are looking at a thing within two double quotes, it will be always treated directly that it is a string. So even if I'm passing this fruit or saying directly, if I just assign this string inside this string buffer, like just like that, like say string buffer ch is equal to apple, it won't work because the constructors are not designed to accept a string just like that. They are assigned to take it in this way. Okay, so this is how I create a string buffer object, and now I can use this object to say reverse it. So I have a function called reverse directly, so I'll just use ch1 dot reverse. Okay, and that's it. So if I just change this fruit into ch1 here and run this file, you can see it's showing the reverse. As simple as that. So I don't have to use complicated methodologies and logics to modify my string to use it. But again, string is the most common thing which we can use, so we have to understand what are the methods associated with a string, and string buffers and string builder. And one more thing, like you must be wondering like what is string buffer, what is string builder. String buffer and string builder are basically mutable and immutable, that you know, but string buffer and string builder are basically one and the same, and the only difference being is one is thread safe and another is not. What is thread? Threads are going to be covered in the multi-threading concept. So we will know about it later. For now, let's assume that we can do both the functions which are possible in string buffer as well as in string builder effectively and in the similar fashion, right? So whenever you can just interchangeably use string buffer and string builder whenever you want, right? And whenever you are going to modify any string, like you want it in the same object itself, I'll ask you to use the string buffer class instead of the usual string. You can take your input in a string and then convert it into a string buffer object and do the manipulation and convert it back to a string. So how do I convert it back to a string? Yeah. So this must be a doubt. So how do I do that? So if I want to change it, when I'm doing this system.out.println, it directly calls a method. So it is something like my Java compiler is actually very intelligent enough, and it has some tweaks done with the println function. The println function, what it does is whenever I'm passing, you must be wondering like it is just an object, and if I just pass say string demo object, it won't give me any result, right? Yeah, that's right. So that's why every class, I'll repeat, every class has a default function, something like a constructor, which is already defined for every class. And this function is known as the toString method, right? Now, whenever I call this toString method, it is there for every class. As you can see, toString method is returns the string which is containing the characters in this sequence, and its return type is a string. So I have to definitely store it in a string variable. So yeah, spelling mistake. Okay, and it has to be contained in a string variable. So I'll just put it in a string object, which will be just string ref because it shows the reverse. And again, I'm just using this. We just, without even thinking, we use it like reverse. Yeah, it is a variable, and we also put integer I, so plus I. Whenever we do, it is concatenating. Actually, whenever we are calling any objects, say rev here, okay, what it does is actually it is going and accessing rev.toString, converting this object into a string or string variable, and then combine it. So always always remember that println always takes in a string object, and even if any object you're passing through this function by using a concatenating the plus operator, what it does is it tweaks actually call this method which is dot to string and convert it to the string whichever you need, and that string is actually passed to your screen and you see the output, right? So this is one of the ways where you can convert your string buffer object back to a string, and you can store it in another string. Okay. One more thing, like how are we going to take inputs? And we haven't covered this part in previous videos, so I'll just start with the very basics, right? And let's keep it very simple. We have to first import a package. And if we remember how to import a package, so import, the first package name is java dot util. Okay, what an util? Util contains a very useful class, which is the scanner class. Okay, and scanner is a important class. Why? Because it will help us to take our inputs. As simple as that, and it is the most user friendly, I'll say coder friendly. User won't be knowing our scanner class. So mostly coder friendly because it has smaller input codes. So we'll just see how it is done. So general way of declaring an object, scanner scan equal to new scanner system dot in. When I'm just saying system.in means system.in means the standard input, that is nothing but taking input from our keyboard. Okay, we can pass a string or a sentence here and it will scan it. Scanner, basically any object of scanner will scan our entire input here, whatever we are putting inside, and this argument will be scanned, And what we are going to scan, all the scanning is done in form of tokens. So suppose I have to take an input. So I'll ask my user, okay, this is getting really complicated. Don't you feel like typing system.out.println every single time? It's very hectic, right? So I found a tweak in NetBeans IDE. I don't know if it is possible in other IDs. There are some tweaks I know in Eclipse IDE, and in NetBeans, here's the simplest way to write system.out.println. So what you do is S out, and press tab. Bingo. So we have our system.out.println automatically typed inside it. And this is something our autocomplete feature of NetBeans IDE. You can always use it, right? So I'll just print a message for the user that enter your favorite fruit. Okay. And then what we do is we need a string variable, and I think we will just reuse these variables like they are. Okay, string fruit equal to, now what? Now we have to take the input. And how are we going to take the input? We are going to do something like this. We will use the object of the scan. So scan dot, we have a method called next, and since I said everything is taken as a token, that means that every single token is actually nothing but a string. So scanner always scans our entire input in form of tokens that are like strings, right? So it will scan each and every word as a packet. So if you're like reading this thing as next, it will just read a single word. So in basic terms, we can just say next means it is reading the next word, the immediate word, from its position from the starting of our input, right? So if we have to suppose read a line or a sentence, so we have to actually read throughout the line, right? So then we can use this function, which is next line. Okay, so there are two things which we can use. It is one is next, and this is next line. Let's not bother ourselves with pattern and string pattern right now. For now, let's focus on these two methods only. So for now, I'll just use this method, which is next line, and this will read my entire line of input. Let's try it out. So our basic function is like, it will ask the user like, hey bro, tell me your favorite fruit, and it will take the input using the scanner object and next line method. Then it will transfer this fruit variable inside a string buffer object, that is ch1. Ch1 will actually use its own function like, yo bro, I can modify strings, so give me this stop, and it will just reverse it. And after reversing, string object will say, okay, give me back my stuff. So it takes in from the string object, string buffer object, using the toString method, and then we print the reverse word or our reverse fruit. So I'll just put it as some housekeeping stuff, like it will look neat. That's why your fruit is reverse now, and a plus. Right now, my program looks neat and it is a little bit interactive. Okay, and it asks me like, what is your favorite fruit? So I'll just say mango. Your fruit is reversed now, ognam. Wow, weird fruit. Okay, so these are like the simple stuffs which we can actually use, do through our strings, right? So now you know, like, string is an object, string is actually a class, and you can create object every time you're creating any variable for string. Then we have different classes for storing strings, so string buffer or string builder. and strings are immutable. So we are using string buffer or builder to modify any of the strings, right? And every class has its own functions. So strings have their own functions. String buffer has their own functions, and we are going to use different types of functions to explore more about it. And one important thing is how to take input for a string, and that is using the scanner object, scan next and scan next line. Next is used to just scan a single word, and next line is for scanning the entire set of thing. Now you must be again wondering, like, how do I store, say, a number, or go for another thing using the scan? And this is just a bonus part which I'll do for scanners. Like, suppose if I have to store an integer, then it is very simple. You just scan for the next integer and take it very literally. And when I say literally, you have to just go for next int. That's all. That's all. Uh, Follow the naming conventions. So it is always in the camel case. So next, capital I int, right? Don't write this I as small. So suppose if you want to scan a double, right? So double B equal to scan dot next double, right? And likewise, you can have any type of scanning for any type of thing, like big decimal, big integer, big a boolean, byte, a float, long, short, all these data types, you can just take it like that. Just remember that all the names of your data type, like the starting letter of your data type, is always capital letters. So you have to just follow that convention. So if you are good with your naming conventions, definitely you won't have any trouble by taking any input from the user. So yeah, let's transfer this entire code into our reverse function here. So I'm creating a new function here. Say public void vvoid void. Um, so reverse string, right? And what I'll be doing here is just the stuff. So it will scan, take the input of the favorite fruit. It will transfer it into this thing. We don't need these stuffs here. Transfer it into a buffer object. String buffer object will convert it. It will revert it back to string, and then it will display it. Okay, we have some error. What is my error? Okay, there is an extra brace, I guess. Okay, and we forgot our brace. Right. I mistakenly copied the brace of my name as well. Okay, so yeah, always maintain these braces in this lines. It is easier to track them, like where do they start and where do they end. So that's the easiest way. Okay, I probably don't need this stuff. Let's delete it. So yeah, for using the scanner, we have to import this package, and that's how we reverse a string. Thank you, and meet you in the next video.